Dr. Claudia Six is a clinical sexologist, a couples counselor, and author with over 35 years' experience helping people turn disconnection into desire and loneliness into genuine intimacy. Born and raised in Paris, and later a water ski instructor at Club Med and a self-professed ski bum in Aspen, she brings a rare mix of European candor, playfulness, and psychological depth to her work, captured in her book, Erotic Integrity, How to Be True to Yourself Sexually, and 2 very successful TEDx talks on why it's never about sex and what happened to sex in our relationships. Through straight talking, 90-minute virtual sessions with clients around the world, she invites people to bring honesty, courage, and self-knowledge back into their love lives so they can feel turned on by themselves, each other, and life again. Gosh, that's a lot. So I'm just gonna dive straight in. And I guess the first question, one I didn't sort of forewarn you about really, was can you take us back to your teenage years, your teenage self? Were you somebody that was very comfortable in your own body, your own sexuality very early? Did it come to you? Were your parents very open and very permissive, or what was the teenage you like?
Well, I had a lot of information about sex at a very early age in a totally appropriate way before I was a teenager. As a teenager, no, I was mortally shy. I didn't like my body. I was a late bloomer. I had all the information and I was dispensing information to my friends who asked for it. But I personally, no, I was a wallflower. I was terribly, terribly shy and unsure of myself.
And when was there a pivot? Was there a specific moment, a particular person, an event? When did you start to become more comfortable in that aspect of your own sensuality?
Well, I'd say it's a work in progress. I mean, are we ever done? Are we ever done growing and developing and becoming more self-accepting? It's just been a lifelong journey. It's not like, a pivot or a specific moment. Just life experiences made me more confident. But this topic is something I've always been interested in. It's always been my lens on the world. So my work hasn't necessarily been a reflection of my own development. It's been a reflection of my proclivity, and really the only thing I've been interested in, honestly.
It's quite a step from, or maybe it isn't, but from a water ski instructor, a ski bum, to doing what you do now. So there must have been something that drew you to think, right, this is going to be not only an interest and a passion, but a career. So what was it that pulled towards the studying and the hard work you've had to put in to get to this point?
Well, I'll kind of go back a little. I'll answer your question, but I'll go back a little bit more and kind of tell you my origin story. So my parents, probably hoping to save themselves some time, figured they weren't going to give me a birds and the bees lecture. They were going to wait until I asked questions. And I asked a lot of questions at a very early age, so much so that by the age of 5, I had all the information. And in France, Catholic widows all wear black. And my father would take me to visit, her Catholic widow friends, and I would tell them all about babies, how babies were made when I was 5 years old, much to their consternation. And then, as a teenager, I was the one telling my friends, don't do anything you don't want to do. Make sure on birth control, make you have pleasure, and it's not just about him. And I was a geography major in college, mostly because I just didn't know what else to do, and geography was interesting, and there were a lot of boys in the geography department. And then I was lost and confused. I didn't know what to do with my life. And then I had an opportunity to go teach water skiing at Club Med. I was already a water ski instructor. So I went. And then after Club Med, I went back to college a little bit, university. And I was still lost and confused. I knew I could get a job in Aspen, Colorado. So I quit school again, much to my parents' dismay. And I ran off to Aspen to be a ski bum. So these weren't career choices. They were just sort of fun places to park myself while I kind of figured out what I wanted to be when I grew up. Because I knew I wasn't going to be a geographer. And then the pivot point actually was My father was hiring employees for his company in San Francisco, and he was looking at psychological tests to give prospective employees to see what their optimal work environment was. And I was to be the guinea pig. And so I got to take a lot of these psychological tests. The upshot was that I wanted to help people. And I thought, well, okay, I'll go into resort management so I can take care of my employees. But then I thought, well, no, I'm always giving sex advice to my friends, and they always tell me I'm always so helpful and I make them feel so much better. And I thought, maybe I should be a sex therapist. And you have to work for yourself. So that worked. A little controversial and edgy back then, not so much now. And so I finished my geography degree. I did a year and a half of prerequisite psychology classes because I'd never had any psychology. Then I found a master's program that would accept me, given that I had been a water ski instructor bum and I wanted to be a sex therapist. Nobody took me seriously. So I did a 2-year master's in a year and a half, and then I got my PhD. So I got a master's in psychology to learn how to do therapy. And then I got a PhD in clinical sexology to specialize in sexuality. That was my journey, my convoluted journey.
And is it a journey you're always happy you took?
Yes. Because when I was being a ski bum and a water ski instructor, all my friends in college, and they bought the condominium and they bought the car and they started their career. And I was like, I can't do that because I don't know what I want to do. And they all envied me for my sort of footloose and fancy-free lifestyle, living in beautiful places. And so I had that, I kind of got that out of my system. And then when I realized, the career I wanted to have, then, I put my nose down to the grindstone and made it happen. But I had a lot of fun years. I lived in beautiful places, and it was a great sporty lifestyle.
I sometimes wonder with people that are sex therapists, sexologists in that space, whether it's akin to being a top chef. In that you've had a lot of sort of chefs, they come home and they just have scrambled eggs on toast every day. Because they've had so much, they've been sort of surrounded by so much gorgeous, beautiful, sensual food, and then when they get home, it's like, oh, scrambled eggs on toast. So do you find that your working life impacts your home life more than perhaps if somebody was an accountant or a policeman or a detective or whatever?
No, on the contrary. I'm very, very comfortable with my sexuality, very comfortable communicating with a partner. I think sexuality is part of quality of life. I think it's important. It's not something that I neglect. If anything, it's something that I treasure that much, because every day with my clients, I see what happens when you don't.
Something you talk about in your book and other things I read is erotic integrity, about how that's central to what you do and what you've written. So in live terms, in a practical sense, what does erotic integrity feel like in somebody's day-to-day life? And add-on question, how can you tell if you drifted away from that in a relationship?
Okay, well, let me just give the basic tenets of erotic integrity. So for years, people said, oh, you have such an interesting job, you should write a book. And I said, well, when it comes to sex, I haven't invented anything. If I come up with something new, I'll think about writing a book. And then I realized that that with every client, I had this lens that I called erotic integrity, but I didn't necessarily even use those words with my clients. But I was looking for So erotic integrity, there's three components: the self-examination, knowing who you really are as an erotic being, because a lot of us are trying to be square peg round hole, we're trying to be the way we think we're supposed to be, hetero, vanilla, monogamous, missionary, but there's so much more breadth to who people are as sexual beings. So self-examination to really know who we are as sexual beings, accepting that. So if you discover that, maybe you're a little bisexual, or maybe you're a little, submissive, or accepting that about yourself. And then the third step is self-actualization, which sounds very dry, but basically just means how to live that authentically. And so when I work with clients, they might present with one problem, but I'm looking at the bigger picture and I'm trying to unpack, who is this person as an erotic being? Like, who are they really? And do they own that? Do they accept their sexual wiring or their proclivities? And then support them in having that fit into their lives in a way that works for them and whoever they're being sexual with. So the upshot, you said, how do you know? Well, I'd say that you're in an erotic integrity when you're being authentic, when you feel free with your sexuality. And that doesn't mean, inappropriate and like, willy-nilly, all over the place. But it just means that when you own it, you're comfortable with it, and you're being authentic. And that can be hard to discern because so many people have trouble being authentic in other areas of their lives from lack of permission, or they think it's not okay, or they won't be accepted, or they'll be rejected. So erotic integrity is not a black and white, you're in, you're out, you're good, you're bad, you're doing it right, you're doing it wrong kind of thing. There's a lot of gray areas. Somebody can be in erotic integrity, or I'm going to make this more complicated. Somebody can be in erotic integrity with themselves, not necessarily in their relationship. So say, for example, and this guy is in the book, and he was a real client. For example, somebody who's into BDSM or dominant submission, and he knows that his wife won't go there. He knows that she's going to think it's sick and twisted. And if he wants to do that with her, she's going to shut down, she's going to divorce him, and she's going to take his kids. So he knows there's no room for his erotic integrity in his marriage, but he loves his wife and he wants to keep his family together. So he's going to restrict his sexuality to what is going to be acceptable in his marriage. But on the side, he has a play partner, somebody that he does BDSM with, dominant submission, bondage, whatever it's going to be. And BDSM often doesn't involve sex or intercourse. It's just about the exchange of energy. So he knows who he is. He accepts it. He lives it authentically in these little sessions, like, once every couple of weeks with this person that he does only that with. So he's in erotic integrity with himself, but he can't be in erotic integrity in his marriage. So there's gray areas. I don't know if I've answered the question and made it more complicated.
No, you have, but it leads on to lots of other questions, I guess. But to have integrity and to be authentic, does the person in that example have to tell his partner, tell his wife that that's what's happening? Or can he truly believe he has integrity and he's being authentic if he doesn't tell his wife?
Well, he suffers, he struggles, which is why, this particular gentleman came to see me. But I had to help him sort of come to terms with the fact that this is who he is, and it just wasn't going to fly with the wife. It just was not in a place where she could accept that about him, which is a shame. But that was his predicament. And so that's a really drastic example of somebody who's in erotic integrity with himself and lives it authentically, but keeps his marriage, is judicious about self-disclosure to keep his marriage happy and keep, his family together and raise his children. It's tricky stuff.
It really is, and thinking, and I've been in a marriage. I've been married for just over 20 years. I guess 20. What are we now? 26, 20, 23 years. And my wife and I are the same, but very different people than we were when we met and when we got together. We were both in our 20s and much younger when we got together. And things that we might have enjoyed then, we maybe don't enjoy now. Things that we perhaps might want to enjoy now, we didn't enjoy then. And I think there is that very real fear of bringing something up. So me saying to my partner, as a pure example, I get off on the idea of me wearing women's lingerie, or I get off on the idea of me being submissive to you, whatever. And there is that fear, oh my goodness, if I bring this out in discussion with my partner, am I going to lose what I have and therefore not gain anything at all? Or is my wife perhaps thinking that, I'd love to be more dominant sometimes? And both of us are we're both over here thinking, oh, she'd hate that, and he'd hate that. And then actually, never the twain shall meet. How do you advise people almost to create a safe space for that conversation? Because the last thing people want to be is judged or belittled or thought of as a perverted or whatever. You just want to have the conversation. How should people create that safe space just to have that conversation? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Well, ideally, there's a solid enough foundation to the relationship. There's a solid foundation of trust and acceptance that you would know that you can bring something up and that your partner knows that they can say, gosh, I really appreciate you telling me that. And I imagine it might not have been easy to tell me. And I got to tell you, that just really freaks me out. It scares me, or it's really uncomfortable. Or they might say, I don't know how to do that. You want me to top you, but I don't know how to do that. I feel very inadequate. Oh, well, that, we can work with that. Or they might say, people who are, we're kind of focusing on BDSM, but it could be, anything. People who do that are this way. They're gay, or they're pedophiles, or they're violent people, and I have this judgment and I can't get beyond it. So I appreciate you telling me that this is something that turns you on, and I can't go there with you. And so, maybe you could masturbate to porn that it involves that, and, and get your jollies that way and have that be part of your life. Or maybe you could, dress up in women's lingerie when you're by yourself and I'm not in the house, and, just make sure that you put it away and the children don't find it. So ideally, there's enough trust, but often there isn't, because couples get complacent and they play it safe and they don't want to rock the boat, and people choose safety over authenticity. And I love that I have a number of clients in my practice who are couples in their 70s, because sexuality evolves over the course of a lifetime. It's not static, and it's not unusual for people to discover aspects of their sexuality as life goes on, or as they have certain experiences that give them more permission to be a certain way. I have one client who's in his 60s. It's a couple, and he might be closer to 70. Anyway, he did the AIDS ride a few years ago, which is a big fundraiser here in California for AIDS, and people, they ride their bike several hundred miles. A lot of gay people on this ride. And he said that he had never been exposed to so many gay people. And it was actually kind of, he learned to flirt with men. Now, he's not attracted to men. There's no hanky-panky with any men. There's nothing, there's no action. But he discovered an aspect of himself that he had not known before. He didn't know how to flirt with anybody, and he didn't know how to be around gay men. And so he's discovered a level of comfort and freedom within himself that has him now want more with his wife. Now, he didn't necessarily sign up for that. So she's having a little trouble getting on board.
It's interesting you say about, I think through life, many people have a tendency to play it safe, whether that be in careers, in their love life, in whatever. We have a tendency to play it safe. And I think you've talked before about couples drifting into that sort of polite coexistence. And I think and many couples are probably at the same stage my wife and I are at, that in a couple of years' time, our children will have left home and we'll suddenly have this sort of empty nest, I think they call it. And we'll have a look at each other and think, oh, it's just the two of us. Oh, okay. Or we think, oh my goodness, it's the two of us. Oh my, wonderful. We can have naked days again. We can do whatever on the kitchen table or whatever. But it's how do you help people avoid us drifting into that polite coexistence, almost becoming housemates as opposed to lovers? I mean, like I said, there shouldn't be an age limit to showing love in a physical way if you want to. How do you get past that empty nest stage where suddenly it's back to the two of you again?
Well, a lot of the couples I see are disconnected couples. So they're either couples with young kids, sex begets children and children are the death of sex, and they haven't had sex since the birth of the last child, 5, 10, 15 years, really. Yeah. And then I see menopausal couple where her libido diminishes and his does not. And where does that leave them? And empty nesters who have neglected their relationship. And now they're like looking at each other like, oh, now what? Do we rebuild this or do we kind of call it quits? So I think it's a natural, unfortunate tendency for people to be complacent in their relationships. And it's easier to focus on the kids because there's always something going on than to focus on each other. And people stop having the honey, how was your day conversation. And they just talk about, oh, I took Tommy and, Josie needs braces and, we need a play date and, your mother-in-law's coming, that people talk about logistics, and because it's easier, it's not vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think it's a natural tendency, unfortunately, and you really have to have the drive to not neglect your relationship. I definitely have the drive to not neglect my relationship. Maybe because I see what happens when you do neglect your relationship, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's kind of a laziness. And it's a lot of work to then kind of, hoist the marriage back up.
Yeah. Yeah, because kids do dominate your calendar and everything else, and they do. You can very easily let them fill the entire time, and then when suddenly they're not around, it's my goodness, all this time now, what do we do? And I don't want to go and play golf. I don't like golf, so what am I going to do really? But I also think that there is that very natural inclination that we have as humans to think of sex as being goal-oriented and penetration-driven. So, and I think if we could perhaps somehow in our own minds recalibrate and think of sex as pleasure. So I want to still have pleasure. I mean, what am I now? Mid-50s. My erections aren't as hard as they were when I was 20. I can't keep an erection for an hour or whatever. It just doesn't happen. So I think, oh my gosh, I can't have sort of sex with my wife for an hour. Am I failing on having sex? But actually, what might be as pleasurable is brushing her hair, sensual massage, mutual masturbation, all of those things. And I think we sometimes get hung up on sex as being the thing and not thinking actually, well, sex is it's a smorgasbord of different elements. It doesn't have to just be penis and vagina in heteronormative sex. Is that something you agree with, that sex is more than that, and that we can think about it as pleasure instead of just penetration?
Definitely. And I would go one step further. I would say it's about the exchange of energy.
Yes.
Because if
Okay.
you think about pleasure, people can be very like inward focused, like I want
Yeah.
to have pleasure.
Hmm.
And they are not so focused on connecting with their partner. But if you think about the exchange of energy, I know it sounds woo-woo California,
No.
but when you are pleasuring each other, you're exchanging energy. You're present with each other. So I'll give you a simple example of exchanging energy. For example,
Mhm.
a lot of people have cats and dogs. Dogs are just, they'll just take any kind of love they can get. But cats are very picky. So if
Yes, I'm going to
you are
be.
petting a cat, if you are petting a cat and you have energy in your, I can feel it just talking about it. If you have energy in your hand, petting the cat will purr and arch its back and it will stay. If your hand, the cat is like, I ain't got time for this. That's exchange of energy.
Mhm.
If you're not exchanging energy with the cat has no time for you. And when people can, you can hug somebody and exchange energy with them, and then you take your clothes off and people kind of like, they pull their energy in because there's a vulnerability.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's not about, put the penis in the vagina, wiggle it around, and somebody comes and then, that's it, it's over. That's very short-sighted. The exchange, yeah, the brushing, the sensuality and the exchange of energy. Because as people get older, yeah, the vaginas get tired and penises, get tired, and it's not so much about that. It's a lot more about caressing and eye gazing and fondling and licking. And you said your penis may not stay hard for an hour like when you were 25, but you still have two hands and a mouth and toys and feather dusters and whatever, feather boas, whatever you've got laying. So yeah, I tell people more it's about presence, an exchange of energy, and that will carry you through anything. If you've got presence, an exchange of energy, it doesn't matter whether, the penis is up or down or taking a break or, out to lunch, or it doesn't matter. And
How
there's,
much?
sorry.
How much of it? How much of it do you think is to do with the relationship we have with our own body, our own self-pleasure practice? And the reason I ask that is I think certainly in the UK and in America, I'm sure lots of countries, that when we first hit puberty and we first sort of learned that touching ourselves is pleasurable and we want to do it all the time, and it's fabulous, it tends to be something we do in secret, on our own, bathroom door locked, bedroom door locked, whatever. And then, my God, imagine your parents walked in, that would be the worst thing in the world. And we sort of quickly get ourselves off, and that's what we do. And I think many people could probably look at themselves and think, have I actually spent an hour or 2 hours just exploring my own body and what I enjoy? So I think if we don't understand our own centers of pleasure, it's very hard then to communicate to somebody else. So how important do you think self-love and awareness of our own body is in a relationship?
Hugely, because before you can invite someone else to pleasure you the way you like to be pleasured, you have to know what that is. And a lot of, young women, for example, sort of like hand their body over, like, okay, here, you figure it out. You find the sweet spots because, I don't know, and that's not a fully participating lover. Like if you know your body and you can say, touch me this way, or I like this, or I like that, or, that actually doesn't really do it for me, but this here really does. That's much more of a gift as a lover, because then you set everybody else to, you're setting both of you up to win. You're setting both of you up for success, because then, assuming a heteronormative, model for the sake of conversation, then he can provide her with pleasure and he gets to feel like the dude, and she gets to receive pleasure because she knows how to ask for what she needs. But most people, it's true, there's a lot of, even if there isn't shame about masturbation. There is taboo, and people know that, you know, you don't do it in public, and you do it, and hopefully closed bedroom doors are respected, and closed bathroom doors are respected. So people have privacy, and kids and teenagers have privacy. But people tend to want to just rub one out, just want to get to the orgasm and kind of relax and go to sleep and move on. So not enough people don't take enough time to pleasure themselves.
Yeah, especially when you're a teenage boy. It's not, you're not thinking of it relaxing, and yeah, it's it's just all about how quick you can get it done, really, which is not necessarily a good precursor to having good sex later on. But when I guess in particular, when women come to you, perhaps, and they've been in a long-term relationship, that relationship's ended for whatever reason, and they are uncertain about how someone is going to view their body and how they're going to perform sexually, and they have that anxiety. How do you help almost them release the anxiety and sort of trust in themselves that they'll do the right thing at the right time?
So it's interesting you asked the question saying women come to me, because actually that's not specific to women. Uncertainty about what their body's going to do. Like, for example, if somebody's newly single, or newly divorced, or people, this happens to men and women. They don't know, for one thing, there's the STD conversation that has to happen. There's, do you have any sexually transmitted diseases? So that the timing of that be, discussed, because it needs to happen. And then there's birth control. Does that conversation need to happen, depending on how old somebody is? It's tricky. I can normalize, I can talk to people about how they masturbate and what happens with their body when they masturbate. And chances are, if this is happening when you masturbate, then, your body's not broken. So that. And, pace yourself and go slow, and don't do anything you don't want to do, and make sure you have eye contact, and make sure you feel comfortable, make sure you're not rushing anything. That sweet before you become lovers at any age, it doesn't come back. It's like, once you cross that boundary, it's like that pre-lover phase doesn't come back. That discovery and exploration and wonder. There's plenty of still, good times to come, but I would tell people to go slow. And the thing about, you've sort of touched on body image a couple times. As you mentioned, I was born and raised in Paris, even though I don't sound it, and, spend a lot of time in England. And when I came to the States, I didn't know about body image until I came to America. It's a big thing in America, especially for women, not so much for guys. Guys tend to feel fine about how they look, no matter how they look. But, for better, for worse. But body image for women in America is a big thing. Big thing. It's a big hindrance. And it's hard to show up sexually, hard to get your freak on when you don't like your body, and when you don't want your body to be seen. And it's hard to let somebody love you and dig your body when you don't like your body. So it's all very, fraught, and it's different for every person. I don't have a pat answer, just to say that it is stuff that people struggle. It's all part of being vulnerable. It's just, people are just vulnerable. And that's what makes it good.
It does. Yeah, absolutely. And like you see, you shouldn't forget that there are some amazing times to be had out there, whether you're just coming out of a relationship, just starting a relationship, been in a relationship 50 years. Some of the best times could still absolutely still be ahead. I think one of the one of the big challenges that's different than when I was growing up. So when I was growing up, pornography was a torn out page of a Playboy magazine passed on a playground, and it was like, oh my god, that woman's naked. Oh my god, it was so exciting. That isn't pornography now.
Yeah.
I mean, what impact does that have on people in terms of, like you're saying, there's that body image thing, there's that comparison. If you watch porn, you'd assume that nobody has any pubic hair, that all men have, large penises, all women love multiple partners, and all men can, ejaculate 10 times in 10 minutes, whatever. And I wonder what impact does that have on people when they, because obviously men watch it, and I'm sure women watch it as well. And when you go into a new relationship, and it's, are you benchmarking yourself against that? There's almost fast food porn. And I'm not anti-porn, because I've talked to some amazing feminist porn directors, holistic porn directors, that have some beautiful pornography out there, really beautiful stuff. But we almost seem to have this, Pornhub and YouPorn get whatever 4 billion hits a month. It's just like, it's fast food porn. You're never going to be satisfied with it. You're always going to want more and more. And I just wonder what impact your clients feel that has on them, or whether that's something that comes up in your conversations.
So there are lots and lots of different kinds of porn. And there's a lot of homemade porn with regular bodies. And, they're not all airbrushed, blonde, with fake breasts and perfect asses and, piercings and all the right places, or big hair. There's lots of different kinds of porn, and a lot of it represents regular people. And porn, there is some tasteful porn that's done by women that has a plot. Porn is very accessible. And so for somebody who wants to just kind of see something that's going to be visually stimulating, it's going to arouse them quickly, they don't have to deal with a real life human being on the other end of their penis, and they can just kind of like, oh my god, that looks so good. That's it. You come and then you're done. It's very functional. It serves a purpose. It's very functional. Like fast food. Yeah. It's not nourishing. It'll get you off. And yes, women watch porn. It's not realistic, but it serves a purpose. It's there to get people off. But you're not going to learn anything about sex, maybe about anatomy, but not about sex, by watching porn. But there's nothing wrong with watching porn. I mean, I'm not down on it. I'd say for younger people, give them a context. I mean, like, I have a young son, and he has much more information about sex than his peers do, because I'm just kind of very matter of fact about it. But when the time comes, I will give him a context. I'm not going to say this is bad, you can't watch it. I'm going to say, well, this is readily available, and it's not real, and a lot of it is pretty nasty. And you're not going to learn anything. So just, it's there, and this is something that people watch, and if you want to watch it, it's fine. But don't think that you can take that out into the world and translate that to your relationships with partners.
No, absolutely. And I think when I've talked to people in the industry, actresses, actors, directors, they all say the same thing, that the intention is that it's entertainment and not education.
Yeah.
In the same way that if we watch, I don't know, you might watch a John Wick film or an Avengers film or whatever, we don't assume that's real and that it's okay to kill 100 people in 10 minutes, or hopefully we don't. So the assumption that it's okay to bed sort of 5 different women, 5 different guys in 10 minutes, it's odd that we see it that way. It's just I guess another element building on the sort of what the fashion industry told us how we should look and how we should dress and what our hair should be like and our skin should be like and our body shape is. You have the same in porn now, that you do have that thing, gosh, that's not how I look. But then that's not how 99% of the world looks either. So it's almost a fake comparison, isn't it?
That's why I bring people back to presence and authenticity. Just know who you are and be true to yourself and be authentic in how you show up. And you can't possibly do it wrong. I had years ago, I had a guy who was a 27-year-old virgin, and he, you know, he had a number of dates on dating apps, and then one day, you know, like tonight, you know, it was like, tonight's the night, you know, he was going to have sex for the first time with this girl. And he's just leaving my office, and it's a door handle moment, and he's got his hand on the door handle, and he said, "But Dr. Six, what if I do it wrong?" And I said, "If you are present with yourself and you are present with her, you can't possibly do it wrong." So that's why I always bring people back to that. Just know who you are and be authentic. And you can't do it wrong. You can't do it wrong.
Mm. I wonder why so many of us wait till our hands on the door handle on the way out to say what we really want to say. I've done it in therapy and lots of different things. I've got literally right at the end of our session, I have my hands on the door handle. It's like, but
yeah, it's called the door handle moment. Yeah.
I've never heard that. It's a perfect way of putting it. It is literally that. Yeah, it's a funny one. Have you found in the 25, 30 years you've been doing this that the challenges that people face have changed, or do you feel it's the same patterns of behavior that repeat over the last 2-3 decades?
Yeah, I get that question a lot on podcast. I would say no, it's the same. I mean, yeah, there's dating apps, which are just horrible. And, you know, and there's AI, and, you know, mostly dating apps are horrible. But nothing's really changed. People are vulnerable. People want to be loved. People want to be received. People want to be seen. Hopefully, some people don't want to be seen, and that's another problem. But yeah, no, it hasn't really changed. I mean, the core human, you know, aspects of sexuality haven't changed.
No. Do you think we're naturally monogamous, or is that something that society's sort of forced upon us?
Well, everybody's different. So some of us are very monogamous. So, for example, you know, I'm single, I'm on dating app. I am so monogamous. If I'm texting one guy, I can't text another guy because I'm texting that one guy. But, you know, that's me. Some people, you know, just like some people are dominant and some people are submissive and some people are switches and some people are heterosexual and some people are homosexual and some people are bisexual. Some people are monogamous and some people are polyamory, non-monogamous, open, whatever word you want to put on it.
Yeah.
And some people are not. And I really think a lot of it is a matter of wiring. However, a lot of the people who think they're poly are misguided. And I have seen many couples where the primary relationship is not dialed in, and their solution is to go do the fun stuff with somebody outside the relationship, which is an accident waiting to happen. Now, the only way a non-monogamous relationship would work is if the primary relationship is very solid, and that any outside partners and outside relationships strengthen the primary relationship. Maybe you come back to your primary relationship and you share that experience, and it builds trust and intimacy and connection and eroticism in the primary relationship. That's the only way that. And a lot of people are not monogamous, but they're deceitful by. So people get married with the assumption of monogamy, but they never talk about it. And then, you're on a business trip or you're having a bad day and somebody's paying attention to you, or, your wife's pregnant, she's busy with the baby and somebody's paying attention to you, or your husband's working too much, and there's this hot trainer at the gym or whatever, and things happen. That's not really being non-monogamous. It's being deceitful by omission and being out of integrity. And
Yeah.
I'm not judging it. I'm not judging it because it happens. And I tell people it's information. If you're unfaithful, you don't need to beat yourself up, but look at the information. What is the information there? What's going on? What are you finding out about yourself? What are you finding out about your relationship? And sometimes, this is not a popular concept, but sometimes when people are unfaithful or sexual outside of their relationship, they're not necessarily moving away from their partner. They're moving towards a part of themselves that they had either lost touch with, or a part of themselves that they didn't know was there. So maybe with their partner, things have become kind of stilted and monogamous and monotonous and predictable, and there's no room for novelty. And this other person comes into your life, and you discover aspects of yourself that you didn't know were there, just because it's a different relationship and it's a different dynamic. And maybe you find that you can be more free. Now, granted, there's less at stake. You're not paying the mortgage with them. So sex outside of your primary relationship is not necessarily, this bad, evil thing, like there's a good guy and a bad guy. It's information from where, I have this French outlook. I don't have the American puritanical outlook. So for where I sit, it's information. And what's the information? Let's look at that.
It's very interesting. I mean, because there is that point, as you said, that if you're in a relationship, there's some young kids running around, there's the house is a mess, the mortgage, there's bills to be paid, all that sort of stuff to worry about. And then you meet someone in a bar, go to a hotel with them, have amazing sex. Wow, why isn't it like that at home? Why do you think? Plus, there's bills to pay, there's kids running around, there's all this sort of stuff. So it's a case of, well, how do I? And that's almost the challenge in a way. Is that, and I've had colleagues that have unfortunately that's happened to them. They've broken up. They've decided to then go off with this other person, and then they find actually, oh, all that shit I was leaving behind, I brought it all with me now. But also, I've got to pay and everything else. So you think, oh my gosh, it's not quite as clean. It's not quite as clean cut as you think, really. And that is that is a challenge.
It's not the same as it is at home, because you bring a different part of yourself. You show up differently at home. There's always, when there's infidelity, which is a big, painful topic, there's two people. There's not a good guy and a bad guy. There's two people who have co-created a dynamic that led to one person fucking around, or both, or whatever. But there's nobody's wrong or right or good or bad. It's two people.
Something I've heard recommended before, if people are feeling that things are mundane or whatever, just to try different forms of role play. So so the guy can show up as a sexy trainer in the gym, and his wife becomes the sort of client, and they go off to a sort of hotel together. So maybe there's ways to look at it. Maybe there's almost a way to, it sounds silly, almost to be with somebody else, but still be with your partner, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, role play is perfectly valid as long as both people are on board with it.
Yes.
As long as they, there's agreement about what kind of role play is going to work for both of them. It can be, the UPS, delivery guy, the pizza delivery guy, or the personal trainer at the gym, or role play, and dressing up too. A lot of people like dressing up.
And it's so much easier to buy all this stuff now. Everything is online, but 20 years ago you had to go to a sort of a a licensed sex shop to find these things, whereas now go on Amazon and there's
Oh yeah,
a thousand costumes of every variety things you can't even imagine. They're on Amazon, for goodness sake. So it's not arrives in a brown package and that's it. Yeah.
yeah. And the sex toys are like, the remote controlled, programmable, chargeable. It's like I
Yeah.
hear about stuff from my clients, and I'm like, oh my, because I'm not very techie. I mean, I manage, but I don't have my finger on the pulse of the latest, electronic devices. So yeah, I hear about stuff from my clients.
Mm. And do you still find when you deal with certain clients? I know you're based in America, but you deal with clients from all over there.
Yeah.
That there are still meaningful cultural differences in different countries, different ethnicities, different genders. Do people have different views on things because of their historical background?
I have not found that.
Mm-hmm.
Here in San Francisco, there's Silicon Valley, and there's a lot of Indian arranged marriages.
Yeah.
And that is it's a small subset. And they have a particular lens, but for them, it seems to be more about learning basic skills.
Okay.
And when they come to me, it's usually because they want a child, and they haven't really figured out how to get it on reliably. And
Okay.
it really is teaching basic skills and basic communication. That hasn't sort of traditionally been highly valued. So that's one, but that's really a minority. Otherwise, I would say no. I mean, I see clients in South America and Europe, in Canada. It's like, no, it's people in Africa can't really afford me.
Yeah.
So I don't really, and you have to go with people, you have to be with people where they're at.
Yeah.
And sometimes people have religious beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
They want to date and find a relationship, but they have a strong belief about no sex before marriage. And so you just got to be with people where they're at.
Mm.
But I would say not really. Again, people want to be loved, and people are vulnerable, and people want to be received. And we all have faulty beliefs about ourselves. And, we tend to pick partners who confirm our faulty beliefs. That's a bigger topic. Do you want me to go into that, or should I just leave it there?
No, please do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the first things I do with my clients is we all have one big faulty belief about ourselves. You can call it a button, a trigger, a story, a script, whatever word you want to use.
Yeah.
Most people who've done a minimum amount of therapy have heard those terms.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's like 10 or 12 of them, and they're all sort of variations on the theme of I'm not good enough. So we have one big bestseller one, and then a bunch of other little ones just to keep it interesting. And so one of the first things I do with people is try and figure out what their faulty belief about themselves is. And often within the hour, people tell you who they are. And if you know what to look for, you can figure it out. And so, for example, if somebody has a faulty belief of there's no room for my needs, and it's not about throwing your parents under the bus. This goes way back to early childhood. Maybe you were one of a big family. Maybe there was a disabled sibling who kind of hijacked the energy in the family. There's no room, and you develop this belief, there's no room for my needs. And then you take that out into the world and into adulthood, and you manifest romantic partners who are not going to have a whole lot of room for your needs. And how does that show up in bed? Is that somebody who is a strong advocate for their own pleasure? Is that somebody who is good at setting boundaries? No. Is that somebody who's having a good time in bed? Probably not. Is that somebody who's going to be in a big hurry to have sex again? Probably not. Is that something that's going to look like low desire? Yes. Is it? No. It's a faulty belief about there's no room for my needs. So somebody who has that faulty belief, for example, might pair up with somebody whose faulty belief is, I don't know, what would be a good, they tend to pair up with narcissists. But I don't want to get on the bandwagon about narcissists because that's that's another show. That's a series of shows. They might pair up with somebody whose faulty belief is, I don't know, this isn't the best example, but I'll never be heard. There we go. That's a good fit. I'll never be heard. So that person is going to be big about their needs. Because you can go two ways. If your belief is I'll never be heard, you can be really quiet and not voice your needs. Or you can be really loud. You know, in every crowd, there's one loud person on their cell phone.
Yep.
They're telling you who they are. Their faulty belief is I'll never be heard. And so if you have one person who's loud about their needs and one person who doesn't believe there's room for their needs, that it makes sense. This is how it makes sense that those two people picked each other. And this is how it makes sense that they get stuck. So that's what I do. I help unpack people's faulty beliefs, how it makes sense that they're stuck the way that they are, and how that shows up sexually. Does that make sense? Because
No, it really does. No, it was good to go into that, and I do. Yeah, I can really see how certain people manifest certain partners and therefore create certain dynamics within a relationship.
Yeah.
And then without some external help, it's very hard to get past it, really. And one of the big things I have an issue with at the moment in society is this huge growth in loneliness. And I think a lot of that is, even though we can be connected by amazing technological devices, I just think and you talked before about the sort of negativity around apps, and I do think there is a sort of almost a death in our ability to have a reasoned conversation with somebody, whether it be at a bus stop, in a cafe, or whatever. I just think talking to somebody in real life without our phones is something that a lot of us aren't capable of. And I think even within relationships, I think it's very often you can feel quite alone or lonely in a relationship. And yeah, I just wonder what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, in America, there's been talk about the loneliness epidemic,
Okay.
which is why I did my most recent, my second TED Talk a few months ago, and I talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think people are very lonely, partly because they're complacent, and partly because I think some, mores have changed. Like you were asking earlier about dating and relationships. It's like, I think guys now are more afraid of approaching a woman, like the bus stop. Like if somebody, well, people don't take the bus much in America, but so in England.
Mm-hmm.
If you get to the bus stop and you start a conversation, a man starts a conversation with a woman, she might be like, who is this creep? What does he want? Why is he talking to me? Or, maybe it's just somebody who's being friendly and who's exchanging energy. That's an exchange of energy at the bus stop. So the loneliness epidemic, there's all this contact on apps and social media, but it's not really contact. And people are more and more lonely. And you can be in a relationship and be very lonely because people get very polite and complacent and they play it safe and they don't show the parts of themselves that they are not sure will be sanctioned. So they only show the parts that are familiar and safe and easy that they know they're not going to be rejected for. That's the normal. I don't like the word normal because I don't like the alternative, but that's the normal developmental stages of relationships, is that people play it safe and people choose security over authenticity. But that does become lonely because the conversations are just about the kids. They're just about tasks. They're not about some soul searching you've been doing or, some philosophical book you read or, a saying you saw on social media that really, really struck you and that stayed with you for hours that you really want to talk about with your beloved. So that's where the loneliness comes in, is people don't have those conversations. They play it safe. And it's easy It's a lot easier to, just like masturbation is easy because there isn't a real live human being on the other end of your penis. Loneliness is easy because you're not going to be rejected, but it's also heartbreaking.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the death of sex. And some people stay lonely in their marriages for decades, unfortunately. Yeah.
Mm.
And they compensate in other ways. You know, they eat, they
Yeah.
gamble, they
Yeah.
you know, they watch a lot of, you know, media, yeah, and they kind of stuff it. They stuff their feelings instead of saying, babe, I feel lonely. I don't know what to do about it. You don't have to fix it, but I just want you to know this is how I'm feeling. Like, how are you
Mm.
feeling? What's happening for you? That would be a great icebreaker.
It works. It's not threatening. It's not putting any blame on anybody else. It's just saying how you feel about something.
Yeah.
And like I say,
But you have
you're
to
not looking
open your
for
mouth. Yeah.
you're not looking for somebody to fix anything. You're just telling them what's happening in your mind, and that's it really. So
Yeah.
you give me a lot of time. I don't want to take up your entire day. So I just want one more thing I did want to ask you though. What I'm not sure if you're a big planner or look at the future, but what do you think the next decade of your work looks like? Is it more writing, more speaking, more one-on-one sessions? What do you think the next 10 years holds?
What I enjoy a
Mhm.
lot is one-on-one sessions, or actually one-on-two sessions. And now it's mostly on Zoom, you know, since
Yep.
COVID. I really like that. You know, there's all these, you know, marketing coaches, you know, give you all these ideas, all these things you should do. It's like this is what makes me happy. And this conversation I'm really enjoying. I am going to be doing more public speaking and teaching.
Mhm.
I'm going to be speaking to corporate groups. I'm going to be speaking to cancer patients. I'm going to be speaking to women's groups. I don't really have another book in me, I don't think. I'm kind of a one wonder. I tell people I'm not a writer, I'm an author. I authored a book, it was published. I'm not somebody who wakes up every morning just dying to write stuff. I do. I write every week on my, you know, on my blog,
Mhm.
and on Psychology Today. And so, yeah, I'd say the next 10 years are raising my son and seeing more clients and continuing to write every week and doing more teaching.
And you don't have to answer this. On a personal level, you're open to new relationships with people?
Oh, I'd like to find the love of my life. Yes, that is my dearest hope and desire. I am put on this earth for relationship. I am not designed to be single. It doesn't mean I'm lonely and I can't be
Yeah.
single. I'm fine living my life single.
Mhm.
But I am really wired for relationship. I want nothing more than to find the last relationship. Yeah. So if you have anybody listening,
I'm sure there'll be your inbox will be beaten down. I'm sure. So do you I know I said that was going to be the last question 2 questions ago,
it's fine.
but
It's fine.
when you so when you meet somebody and you start maybe the first time, second date, third date, whatever, and so what do you do? Well, I'm an engineer, or I'm a teacher, or whatever. I'm a sex therapist. Are people like imagining your bedroom as sort of there's chains and handcuffs everywhere, or they imagine, oh my god, she's already analyzed me, she knows what I was like as a kid, and I'm terrified? Or what do men think when you say I'm a sex therapist?
Well, I don't bring it up quickly. I usually just say I'm a relationship therapist or a couples
Okay.
therapist, which is pretty much what I am, you know,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's never.
yeah,
Um, if somebody's intimidated, they're not my man.
yeah.
I'm just a girl, you know. I'm just a girl who wants a partner, who wants to be
Mhm.
loved. You know, I don't have whips and chains and mirrors all over my bedroom.
They're in the drawers and under the bed.
They're in the closet.
Yeah.
Um, but really, if somebody is intimidated by what I do, then they're not the right
Yeah.
person for me.
It's quite a nice filter, actually. Sort of filter them all out quite quickly, and then don't have to worry about those people. Move on to the next people.
Yeah, I want to be with a man who knows who he is, who's confident. It doesn't mean he has to, swing from the chandeliers every night, but yeah, it's 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 part of the selection process, I guess.
Thank you for everything you shared. It was fascinating. I thought it would be, but no, I was really interested in so many things you had to say. I can't wait to listen back. So no, thank you so much for your time, and
Oh, my
keep
pleasure.
doing your day.